Tonight, we're getting the first look at Ward 9D in Tan Tock Seng Hospital, the epicentre of its recent Covid-19 outbreak. For the first time in this pandemic, every resident of an HDB block will be undergoing mandatory testing for the coronavirus. Jewel and Changi Airport's passenger terminals will remain closed to the public until the end of the Phase 2 heightened alert period. This is the Straits Times Newsnight. Good evening, I'm Chiao Su-en. Now, for the first time since the Covid-19 outbreak at Tan Tock Seng Hospital, cameras have been allowed into the epicentre of the TTSH cluster, Ward 9D. After a deep and thorough cleaning, the ward reopens tomorrow, more than 3 weeks after the first case was detected there. Multimedia journalist Azim Azman gets an inside look at Ward 9D, and this is his report.
This is Ward 9D at Tan Tock Seng Hospital today. On April 28th, it was reported that a nurse deployed on the ward had tested positive for COVID-19. The case was the first of a cluster that now stands at 46 people, including staff, patients, and their close contacts. 3 weeks after TTSH stopped admitting new patients and barred visitors, except for critically ill patients, the hospital is now reopening to new admissions, and measures are in place to provide greater protection. The affected areas have been deep cleaned and new specialist equipment has been installed. Ultraviolet and hydrogen peroxide vapor is used to deep clean and decontaminate the wards. Ventilation and air purification within the wards has also been improved by introducing exhaust fans and portable HEPA filters. Patients will be limited to one pre-registered visitor a day, and each visit will be limited to 30 minutes a day. Visitors must continue to be masked and no eating or drinking is allowed during the visit.
So I think what gives us the confidence to reopen is the fact that we've been doing fairly regular testing in the inpatient setting in the last 3 weeks, and we have fortunately not found any new infected patients or new clusters of patients. Even from the first day when we discovered the first patient, we had already come up with fairly stringent isolation procedures.
To prevent another outbreak, staff will now have to undergo routine rostered testing at regular intervals. Tan Tock Seng has also stepped up their requirements for personal protective equipment for the staff. Aside from physical health, the staff's mental well-being is also taken into consideration.
Care workers, medical staff, they tend to be pretty stoic, and you don't know what's going on in their mind. You don't know the concerns that they have, not just their personal safety concerns, but also the concerns of their other colleagues around them, family members, the risk of bringing the infection home to the family and all that. So I think it's been a multi-pronged approach in trying to ensure that all safety measures were put in place, not just physical safety, but also psychological safety.
While Ward 9D reopens, the repercussions of the TTSH cluster are still being felt. It was announced on May 20th that an elderly man linked to the cluster had died from complications related to COVID-19. Azim Azman for the Straits Times.
Now let's have a look at the latest COVID-19 numbers. Today saw a total of 40 new COVID-19 cases, of which 30 were local community ones. Of these, 8 were unlinked. The other 22 local cases are linked and 16 had already been quarantined when they were detected. Now, in light of the heightened alert, the Manpower Ministry is encouraging migrant domestic workers to stay at home during their rest days. On such days, employers should not assign work to their helper, and if they do, they must provide compensation in lieu of the rest day. For the first time in this pandemic, an entire HDB block of residents will be undergoing mandatory COVID-19 testing. All 116 households in 506 Hougang Avenue 8 Multimedia correspondent Yo Sam Jo spent the afternoon there, and here's what he saw.
Behind me is the void deck where residents of Block 506 Hougang Avenue 8 are getting their mandatory swab test after some who live here tested positive for COVID-19. The swabbing began at 1 in the afternoon today for residents of the first 6 floors. The rest of the block will be swabbed from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. tomorrow. Others said they received text messages from the Ministry of Health informing them of the mandatory swab test and their designated appointment time.
My sister received a message from, I don't know where, but I didn't receive the message. But she told me that the residents in this block need to do a swab. I have been working from home for 3 weeks, so I didn't go out much, so like I think that I'm still safe, so it's just staying at home. Yeah, so not so worried about that.
Well, me, I'm worried. I was worried. Why? Because I've got my parents who's elderly and I got a son who's only 5 months. So I'm just afraid that, this virus might, now they say it's airborne and stuff. So I'm just afraid for both my parents and my son. Hope there's no one got the COVID. Like, it's all good for everyone. Do not want anyone to get sick and stuff, because right now it's really hard time for everybody.
The makeshift swab test station, comprising barricades, chairs, fans, and other equipment, was set up this morning, complete with designated entry and exit points. Health Promotion Board staff in personal protective equipment, safe distancing ambassadors, and medics were all spotted on site. Aljunied GRC MP Gerald Giam, who was here earlier to speak to residents, said the Town Council has cleaned the entire block, including high-touch surfaces, after it was informed about the cases. He urged residents not to be alarmed.
We've spoken to a few residents as well as the shopkeepers of the flats nearby. So there are concerns that because they don't know how many cases there are over here, so they're worried about their own health. But I've assured them that the number of cases is small, and they just need to comply with the instructions given by the officers over here and by the Ministry of Health.
Aljunied Hougang Town Council workers, many of whom were involved in the cleaning of this block, also came to get swabbed today. Meanwhile, elderly residents were given priority and allowed to enter first. The mandatory swab test will continue tomorrow for residents of the upper 6 floors. Yo Sem Jo for the Straits Times.
Now for an update on the largest active COVID-19 cluster in Singapore. Jewel Changi Airport and passenger terminals will remain closed to the public for 2 more weeks as an added precaution. This is until June 13th. The airport remains open for air travel. Meanwhile, another 10 cases were found in a special testing operation out of almost 19,000 airport workers swabbed. Phylogenetic testing results for an initial batch of positive airport workers were found to be similar and of the B1617 variant. This suggests they originated from a common source, which authorities said could have occurred through an airport worker who came into contact with an arriving family from South Asia. And as case numbers here continue to surge, applications from most inbound students to exchange programs at the National University of Singapore have been suspended. This follows tighter border control measures to curb the spike. NUS said that an exception has been made for a handful of countries, such as those with which Singapore has set up unilateral border openings. A couple has been charged with harassing their frontliner neighbours, one of whom is a nurse at Sengkang General Hospital. Lim Sok Lei and Chiang Eng Hock had allegedly made insulting remarks to them, shouting phrases like COVID spreader and virus family. They're also accused of spraying disinfectant in their direction. Lim is being remanded at the Institute of Mental Health and will be back in court on June 4th. Chiang will return to court on June 18th. Now let's take a look at what's been trending on social media today. Korean artist BTS just keep breaking records. The K-pop supergroup dropped the music video for their new single Butter on Thursday. And the BTS army turned out in full force, breaking YouTube's premiere records. The new MV from the mega popular boy band had over 3.89 million concurrent views when it debuted last night. Last time I checked, it had already amassed over 57 million views. So impressive, and what a catchy song. Now, yet another major event affected by the surge in COVID-19 cases here. One Championship postpones its first live show in Singapore since October. The upcoming One Empower event, scheduled for May 28th at the indoor stadium, was set to feature its first all-female fight card, headlined by China's Cheong Jing-nan, defending her women's strawweight title against Michelle Nicolini of Brazil. One said, "As always, the health and safety of our athletes, staff and fans is our top priority. A new date for the event and other details will be announced at a later date." A skyscraper in Shenzhen has been closed for safety checks 2 days after it was first reported to have been shaking. A video on Tuesday showed people evacuating the 72-story SEG Plaza and looking up at it as it began to wobble. Xinhua News Agency reported that the owner of the building has told all tenants and merchants to stay away for inspection work to be conducted smoothly. The Shenzhen government said the specific cause of the shaking is still under investigation. And today is Kindness Day Singapore, a day to celebrate kindness. Despite the doom and gloom of the COVID-19 pandemic, there is still room to lighten spirits and brighten faces with a kind word or deed. So here's a friendly reminder to be polite and gracious, both on and offline. Appreciate our frontline heroes and remember to be kind to yourself too. Have a great weekend, and Dylan and I will see you on Monday.